similar. It lets you request that that data is deleted. So this is where our work comes in. Our work to reform the ad tech industry comes in the form of a complaint to the Data Protection Authority, which is the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK, alleging that the ad tech system is actually illegal under GDPR. So one of the basic things, I didn't write it here, that GDPR does that's in conflict with, with the ad tech industry is they do assert that cookie data is personal data. So just on a fundamental level, they're disagreeing with this sort of industry platform that cookie data isn't personal data. But if you just look at these 4 basic rights, and just anecdotally, it's really just common sense. If you try to apply it to what I told you about the way RTB works, the further down you go, the more impractical and contradictory it seems. So if you're having your information sent out to thousands of companies, billions of times a day, how could you possibly give consent, or more crucially, withdraw your consent from those companies? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you click yes, and they say they're going to send it with third parties. They're off the hook in that respect. Having that information being securely held, when you have this many thousands of companies and you don't really know where your data went, it'd be really difficult or impractical or impossible to really be sure of that. And it gets even worse the further down you go. The logistics involved, let alone trying to do a subject access request, thousands of companies, just like impossible. And same with deleting it. So the complaint that we did wasn't just Open Rights Group. It wasn't just Open Rights Group. It was a joint complaint. So our director did it, Jim Killick, along with Dr. Johnny Ryan of Brave, who I mentioned earlier. Also, Michael Veal of University College London. He's also on the advisory council of Open Rights Group. So it was a joint complaint. I should mention that. So it makes you wonder, if our TB system is completely contradictory, just very obviously, to the basic sort of rights that we supposedly got under GDPR in May of 2018, why does this system still exist? It's very much still in operation. Does it mean that GDPR is basically a sham? A lot of people think that. Our premise is that it's not a sham, is that it's just a matter of enforcement. It's not being properly. That's why we're bringing this complaint, to show evidence that there is this violation happening, and we're trying to hasten enforcement. If we're proven right, not to be dramatic about it, but this would technically constitute the biggest data breach in history, pretty much. So a little more about our complaint. Who's it against? So I showed you that whole shadowy network of the RTB system. We're actually not taking our complaint against any of those actors. Instead, we're taking a very strategic approach, and it's gone against the providers. They're called the providers of the framework for authorized buyers. So that would be Google Ads and IAB, which stands for Interactive Advertising Bureau. Sorry, it's a lot of acronyms today. And the reason why we've gone after them is because they're the ones who basically set the rules by which all those other ad tech players obey and operate. So everyone knows, or a lot of people know, that Facebook is also a giant of online advertising. People often think of it as Google and Facebook. So why aren't they involved? And I won't go into it. It's a bit technical, but suffice to say, Facebook, the way that they do their ads within their own Facebook platform, it's a bit different. It's a different system. For the purposes of this complaint that we're doing, which is very specifically about RTB, it wasn't appropriate to include them. It's not to say that they're like saints or off the hook for whatever reason. But they're just not involved in this particular complaint. It is a bit confusing because it's true they were involved in the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and and I did mention them earlier, but suffice to say they didn't really fit. So we launched our complaint about a year ago. It was September of 2018, and there have been some really major developments that have happened that are pretty exciting, actually, for this case. So I'll just run you through those real quick. Oops. So back in February, there was some email that was discovered I believe it was an email transmission or some kind of a document where some executives at IEB basically conceded that they realized their RTB system was a violation of GDPR. So this made a good splash in the news when it happened because it was quite self-incriminating, and certainly when it went against that whole concept of the ad tech industry, not really, saying, oh, cookies aren't really, they're not really. This is pretty obvious that it was. So what this did, it really it threw some fire on onto this this complaint. So the second really big development that happened shortly after this was very similar complaints started to pop up all across the EU. At current standing, there's about 20 complaints in about 16 different countries. It's about half of the EU countries. So they've all happened to their own, they each have their own data protection authority. Now, when this sort of thing happens, when you have a very similar complaint happening in 20 different countries or 15 different countries, there's sort of a hierarchy that starts to happen amongst the data protection authorities. So down at the bottom here are some of the countries that have done complaints. And at the top we have Belgium and we have Ireland, not the UK. And the reason for that is when you have them piling up like this, they designate lead supervisory authorities to the countries in which the companies that are being complained against have a headquarters. So Google's actually in Ireland. Their European headquarters is in Ireland. That's why the Irish DPA is taking the lead on this. And IAB, it's Belgium. So it doesn't mean that all the other complaints don't have to happen. I think it's designed as a way to avoid this bureaucracy and have like all these similar things happening and take the burden off of various data protection authorities. So it does have an effect on the progress of all the different complaints, and I can't speak to all of them, but I think some will kind of lay off because they feel like they don't have to do it. But thankfully, the ICO, the British Data Protection Authority, has not decided to do that, which is a good thing, because they led to the last major development, which is, I think, the most exciting and encouraging development. Oh, actually, you know what? I skipped one. This is the Irish Supervisory Authority. The fact that they opened an investigation into Google formally, that was actually a really big step forward. So because Google is based there, when they came forward, that was also like another shot in the arm for the complaint. And we're really happy to see that happen. But we don't want it to overshadow what's happening in the UK because it's really important. So last June, the ICO, again, that's the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK, they came out with a report. And again, this is a complaint. They made a report. It wasn't like a court case or anything, but they did this report, and they essentially agreed with us. They said that RTB is illegal. It's unlawful under GDPR, which is a big deal. We're really, really happy to see that. And one of the most important findings, not to get too technical about it, but they said there's no basis for the claim to legitimate interest. So in the cases where ad tech companies said that they had the right to have access to your personal data, they have legitimate interest to it, what that means is, that means that the company wouldn't be able to operate unless it had, its business would not operate unless it had access to your information. So for example, a bank has legitimate interest to your name and address, certain financial details about you, because they're a bank, you have to know that kind of information. If you're buying some flowers on the street, they don't have a legitimate interest to even know your name or any kind of data about you. So they've always kind of, the ad tech industry, another thing that they've said is that, oh, we have legitimate interest to know everything about you. Sophisticated data profile. And the ICO, very importantly, said that, no, that's not, there is no basis to claim that. So that was a really important ruling. It really kind of weaseled out that way. So this happened back in June. There have been a lot of high-profile GDPR fines in the last year as they've kind of started cracking down on violations across the EU. But you'll notice there wasn't one for this. There wasn't one on Google for this. In this case, there wasn't one for IAB. either. And so the ICO made this statement, but they didn't really do anything. And that was disappointing. Not that we're necessarily looking for a fine, but we really just want the industry to change. Instead, what they've done basically gave the industry 6 months to shape up, and in that time, they're also going to deepen their investigation, and they are doing that currently, to see exactly the full story, because it's quite a big mess, this whole ad tech thing. A couple weeks ago, but suffice to say, there was some people saying, oh, the ICO is not really do anything about it. Look, they didn't actually do anything. We're powerless. GDPR's difference. Just a couple weeks ago, there was a big ad tech industry conference. The ICO was there. It was in Germany, and they came out and they said that they were still holding strong on this. It wasn't fading away. The industry really still needed to show that they can handle and protect data. So, why are they being lenient? We're thinking maybe it's because they want, it is quite a big finding to upend this entire business model that could really disrupt the entire industry. I think they're hoping for a solution that would, I can't see that. Oh, 5, okay. Go by fast. Okay, so we think they're looking for a solution for the industry. I'm sorry, they want the industry to just make this go away, figure it out themselves. Guessing. Now, a few things have been happening. The industry has been reacting. Google's Chrome browser, for example, they recently eliminated some of the tracking abilities. Apple's been doing that. Firefox has been doing that in the browser. What that does is it makes it harder for the ad tech industry to function. There's less data going around. At the same time, in the trade publications within the advertising industry, they've been reporting, it's getting difficult to target people in the same way. Now, this isn't all in reaction. This is in reference to the bigger picture. This industry reaction isn't just to this ad tech complaint. If you think about the oncoming of GDPR, there's been a general awareness. Things like Cambridge Analytica, people are more aware about violations of personal data and privacy and that sort of thing. So perhaps it's no surprise that these things are happening. Okay, and just to finish up, there are a few risks that could come, admittedly, from this complaint. One is that if reforms come, they could actually end up consolidating the industry a bit more, just because the logistics of trying to enforce GDPR on thousands of companies and all this, it's really difficult. If they could just focus on a couple big companies, like Google, it could be easier, and this, may push things in that direction, which wouldn't necessarily be a good thing. Also, the ad tech industry is adapting. They see the writing on the wall. They're trying to figure out how to track people moving beyond cookies as well. So that's a bit of a danger. What's next? We are looking to see what's going to happen, how the industry is going to respond. They said 6 months ago something needed to happen. That's about the end of the year. I'm sorry, they said within 6 months in June, so that's about the end of the year. We're expecting there to be some kind of a reckoning that's going to happen. Meanwhile, what we're doing is, we're coordinating with all the other organizations that are behind the complaints and the people that are behind the complaints across Europe to try to make this happen. But really, it's kind of a moment of truth for the ICO, for GDPR in general, to see if it's really got any bite in the next few months. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen. And the way that you can help out or get involved, and become a member of Open Rights Group. You can get involved with our Manchester group. We have one locally here. You can also protect yourself, as I'm sure you're all very aware of. On an individual level, you can use privacy-conscious browsers. You can use ad blockers, that sort of thing, to reduce the amount of tracking. But if you're interested in getting involved in Open Rights Group, come talk to me, please. I'll be here the rest of today and tomorrow as well. And we're looking for people to help organize our Manchester chapter. We also have groups in 12 different countries, cities across the UK. So I'd love to hear from you.
There we go. Now it's on. Thank you very much for that, Mike. That was fascinating. Before you whip your mic off, we've got time for one question. So it would be the first and furthest away. All right, one question from the back. And then...
Great.
Hi. I don't know if you're aware of the recently proposed do not track legislation in the United States going through the Senate.
Vaguely, yeah.
Are there considerations for similar moves by Open Rights Group for the UK government?
Ah, interesting. Not to my knowledge, no.
Nothing similar proposed, no?
Yeah, not at the moment, but I wouldn't rule it out, though. Certainly something we'd be interested in.
Because it's an interesting idea. It's essentially to legally force companies to respect the do not track in browsers to be respected by every site put up by them. But
yeah, that's really interesting. Obviously, you know, GDPR and everything else and Brexit is adding a lot of uncertainty and whatnot into this equation. But yeah, I wouldn't rule out we'd be in favor of something. Nothing currently.
Thank you very much for that question. And you'll be on the org
yeah, we have
booth
a booth
in
the other
exhibition.
room.
Mike will be there, and
yeah.
you'll be able to come and chat to him. Unfortunately, we haven't got any more time for questions, but you will be around. All right, and thanks very much, Mike. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. I'll just mute that. No problem. All right, folks, so up next in here, we're going to do the panel. We do need